All right. Welcome, everyone. I see people filtering in. Welcome, welcome. Good to have you here. We're going to give it maybe another 30 to 45 seconds. Just let folks filter in before we get started. Just a little housekeeping item. You can see we're not using Zoom this time around. We're using a different platform. So there is a live chat on your bottom right. And there is also a questions module on the bottom right. And so if you have questions, we'll spend some time for Q&A a little bit later. And if you have any questions, just please drop them into that questions module. Or if you want to throw stuff into the chat, feel free as well. So we're going to give it about 20 more seconds. Okay, let's get it rolling. Deric, how are you?
Great, man. How are you, Abhinav?
I'm all right. How was what is it, Thursday? How's your Thursday going so far?
Wide open, sir.
Wide open, ready for this conversation. Excellent. So hi everybody, good to see you. I'm Abhinav Kapoor, co-founder, CEO here at Bicky. We're a customer data platform for restaurants. Our goal is to help restaurants access all of their guest data across point of sale, payments, online ordering, loyalty, etc., and then help them use that data to measure the incremental impact on traffic, on frequency of their marketing and menu decisions. And joining me today is longtime Bicky customer and supporter, Deric Rosenbaum from Groucho's Deli. Deric, I'll kick it over to you. Just please give the audience your background. What is Groucho's? How long you've been there? All that good stuff.
Certainly. Yeah, so happy Thursday, everyone. Glad to be here. My name is Deric Rosenbaum. I am the president and resident CTO of Groucho's Deli. We're a 83-year-old brand based out of Columbia, South Carolina. I have been with the brand for December will be 25 years.
Wow.
I was franchisee number 1, 2, 3, kind of worked in every facet of the business and have kind of been in my current role since 2007, 2008,
Yep.
and it's certainly evolved since then, as has the business. Today, I really oversee every aspect of our business with an emphasis on technology.
Nice. Well, that makes sense for a resident CTO. So the goal of this conversation is to really walk through, I think, what has been when I was reflecting on our conversation on my way into the office this morning, the thing I was thinking about was I was at RFDC last week, and the tone for 2025 was cautiously optimistic. Now I would say that's, hey, finance people, that's kind of what they do, and that they're always sort of cautiously optimistic, but actually it was pretty mixed, or I should say that sentiment was spread out throughout the audience, right? Operators, marketers, franchisees, as well as folks on the finance side were like, with clarity, especially around the election, we are cautiously optimistic as we work through 2025. But when I talk to you, you have a different take about 2025. Can you walk us through maybe how 2024 has been for Groucho's, and then how you think that influences your approach to 2025? Let's start. That's a big question, but let's start there.
Sure. I mean, and like you, I mean, some of the earlier conferences I went to this year, the tag word was "flat is the new up," right? I'm sure you've heard that in many conversations. I mean, just a quick recap of where we are year to date through October. Our new guest count is down 5% over last year.
Okay.
Our repeat traffic is up 22%. There's a reason for
Wow.
this. Our average order value is up 5%, and our revenue is up 6%.
Yeah.
This all year over year. I think, like most people, catering's up, significantly, double digit over, last year, and obviously from the early 2020, 21, 22, 23, catering all but fell by the wayside. So I am optimistic in our strategy that we have been deploying and will continue to deploy into 2025. And, we focus on sound fundamentals. Like, you still have to provide the experience. You still have to provide all the core cornerstones of hospitality, right?
Yeah.
That is a given before we talk about anything else. But now I think the difference is having an agnostic approach, omnichannel approach to all of the sales channels that are available to us today, whether it's Easy Cater, DoorDash, Uber, Grubhub, DeliverDirect, native, third-party native, I mean, whatever.
Yeah.
And then, we're going to continue to optimize in those channels and make them more seamless and more convenient where we can. And our focus has, since you've known me, has been soundly focused on retention.
Right.
Because we believe if you do retention, you gain the frequency, and if you do all of those things correct, you can organically drive some of the new guest acquisition through various mechanisms. I mean, we obviously do spend money on new guest acquisition, but
Right.
we tend to spend 10 times the effort on
On the
retention. And
retention.
I think the name of the game right now is just remaining nimble because the marketplace is changing. And like we talked about, yesterday, there's this fundamental shift in the way people are engaging with restaurant brands.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fundamental
Yeah.
and it's here to stay. And the Gen Zs that are now getting a little bit of money in their wallet, they're ready to spend and they're looking for something completely different. So I think the question that people need to really ask themselves right now is, you know, one of the greatest, not greatest, but one of the most defining things that came out of COVID was convenience, right?
Yeah.
And with convenience, you're inherently giving up something.
Mm-hmm.
What that something is, different to every brand, but you're going to give up either quality in the actual core product, or you're going to give up the inherent degradation that comes with last mile delivery, right?
Right.
You can put lots of checks and balances in there, but there's still a perception of quality degradation when you order from a third party delivery or a native delivery service.
Right.
So how do you navigate that? And then, I think there's lots of other outside influences. I mean, we've all read about the bankruptcies, whether it's legacy brands or new startup brands that are no longer with us or are
Yeah.
coming out of reorganization. And, there's a lot of choices in the marketplace. So how do you stand out and above and make noise above that? I mean, these are different considerations as well.
I think the thing that when we think about so it sounds like if I'm unpacking this a little bit, it sounds like you are optimistic on certain things, but it's largely, hey, 2025 is going to be the same as 2024 for the most part, right? It's like we're still going to be sort of fighting tooth and nail for traffic. Flat is still going to be the new up. One thing I actually wanted to, and so it makes sense to double down on guest retention activities specifically, because the people that know you and love you are your best shot at driving not just, I won't say transaction growth because who knows, but at least driving positive sales growth, whether that's a mix of repeat customer traffic plus higher average check. So it's getting the
Correct.
people that know you and love you to come back as often and hopefully more often, and to spend at least the same amount, and if you can, a little bit more than what they have in the past. That's sort of like the playbook for next year, if I understand it right.
Yeah, I mean, that's our playbook. And then,
Yeah.
putting a little more effort into what the data is telling us about channel optimization.
Right. And let me ask you this. We didn't talk about this on our prep call yesterday, but you said new customer traffic is down 5% this year. How much more do you feel like it would have been? Well, first of all, can you break that apart by channel? Because you mentioned the word omnichannel a few times. How are you seeing, well, we don't have access to third-party data, but so how are you
Correct.
seeing new customer traffic down on an in-store basis versus what you believe it is on a third-party basis? Let's start with that one. And then I want to unpack, the 5% down a little bit more as well. So.
I went and did a little bit of a deep dive this morning, and if you look at core fulfillment, which is just three categories, right, of core fulfillment: delivery, pickup, and in-store.
Yeah.
And then there's lots of nuance to all of those. By and large, they're identical to 2023, like almost identical. I mean, half a basis point. I mean, half a point. So I think, but what has changed is the off-prem versus on-prem, right? So
Right.
I know for our brand specifically, we're 58% off-prem now, and the balance would be on premises. So I
Off-prem
haven't
meaning just
done
delivery, or that's also like takeout? like pick up and leave, basically.
If you take those three components of delivery, pickup, and in-store,
Yeah.
those make up, so pickup and delivery, regardless of the channel,
Yeah.
is, 58% of our revenue,
Yeah. Yeah.
whether it's third party, native, easy cater, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, as far as the degradation and new, I mean, if you go back and historically look at our new guest traffic, I mean, it's always been pretty baseline, flat. I think the down we're seeing is just a presentation of what we're seeing in the economy as a whole. I don't know that it's a shift in channels. I mean, the only channel shifts we're really seeing is we're seeing really good growth in our native online ordering and digital.
Okay.
But I mean, that is very intentional in how we're getting that. So the new store 5% thing is not as concerning to me. Now, if the repeat traffic took a plunge, then
we then
yeah,
yeah.
then the war horses come out.
Yeah. Let me put it another way. And how much do you think new customer traffic would be down if you weren't investing? And maybe it's a silly question because as a brand, you have to always invest in top of funnel and in bringing new people in. But how much do you think your investments have mitigated the extent to which new customer traffic would be down otherwise? And the reason for that question specifically is, what I'm trying to get to is, how much do you think consumers in general are pulling back from eating out and giving their occasional dollars to new concepts in general? How bad is the trial part, right? We always think trial, activation, retention, like those are sort of the bread and butter, phases of the customer journey here. How much is trial in general down? And how much have you mitigated that with the investments that you made so that it's only down 5% as an example? We're getting into the deep stuff now.
I think some of that is intangible, for sure. I think what my deep dive late yesterday afternoon, after we had our prep call, I think what's interesting to me is if you look at our non-habitual guests, and these are of known guests, right?
Right.
So those are first time onboarding, so that's visits 2 through 4. At 5th, we consider you habitual.
Right.
And then you have irregular guests who have no cadence. And then you have re-onboarding guests. So these are guests that have churned out and have now come back into the fold.
Right.
So our overall guest habituality rate is 45%. So those are daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly guests, right?
Right.
And
and by the way, that 45% is, like, I think compared to the other brands we work with, I think I want to say you're 3.5 times better, like 3x minimum better.
I'm actually in the habituality dashboard right here, and we're up.
So you have the
229% over the Bicky average.
There you go. So 3.3x basically. Yeah.
So of the the 55% that are non-habitual, 36% are re-onboarding. So that tells
you you before, and then they disappeared for a while, and now they're coming back, basically.
So I mean, the conclusion I'm drawing is that there's just now a larger cadence between visit 1 through 5, 7, 8, 9, whatever that may be. So is it
stretching out the number of days between their visits, basically?
Correct.
Got it.
So, I mean, is that economy driven? Is it uncertainty driven? Is it, inflation driven? I think probably everything contributes to that, right?
Yeah. Competition as well. I mean, I guess, what are you seeing? So here's the thing, right? And you're in mostly, what's your footprint? Is it mostly like suburban and metro?
Correct.
South Carolina and Georgia, I believe, right?
Correct. And then we're in a few secondary markets, but yeah.
Yeah. And so are you seeing from I think the thing that fascinates me, honestly, about this idea, it's like, on the one hand, on a macro level, we have people telling us the consumer is, like, this has been the story of 2024. Consumer is getting worse. Consumers pulling back. Something you said in the data, consumers are stretching out the occasions that they visit the brands. And then on the other hand, we also hear competition is getting tougher. And so I'm like fascinated by this tension between people visiting less often and there being fewer consumer dollars to go after. And yet we are still seeing, even with the bankruptcies and the culling and the consolidation, we are still seeing more intense competition, or at least more brands pop up in local markets. And so I'd be curious for your take on like what you've seen from a competitive standpoint, because we talked a little bit about inflation, a little bit about consumer spending. What are you seeing from a competitive standpoint, and what did you see in 2024? And then I guess what influence did that have on how you position the brand to even get those repeat guest visits to be up 22% year over year?
I mean, we've definitely noticed an incursion of some of these rapidly scaling brands that, that Dave's Hot Chicken is the one that comes to mind, right? I mean, they opened, what, 175 units this year
Yeah.
or something, some astronomical number. So, I mean, they're basically in every market that we're in now. I mean, they were not there 2 years ago, right?
Yeah.
That's just one use case. Slim Chickens or Whataburgers coming to our markets now. So, yeah, I mean, this is all diluting the wallet for sure. It's diluting the wallet. So, you can't eat burgers every day. You can't eat chicken every day. You can't eat sandwiches every day. So, what is the
Some
right
people might be
message?
able to.
Yeah, some people do. I mean, God's chicken's a thing. But, I think what is the message that resonates? Who are you trying to attract?
Yeah.
How are you trying to attract them? What moves that lever? For a lot of millennials and Gen Zs, they don't really want to engage with a human being. They just want to place an order and have it delivered or have it picked up and in and out. Thank you, thank you. But then on the flip side of that, those same people also want this new experiential experiences, right? So, you're going to like Troy's place to a hot pepper lunch, right? That's an experience. I mean, like it's a completely different experience, and you're in control of the journey of your food to your mouth, literally. Like, how do you cook it? What do you want in it? And then, now there's a lot of talk around the snack talk, right? So this different day part around people snacking instead of like not necessarily traditional breakfast, lunch, and dinner,
Right.
and the growth of C stores. And I mean, I think that's where when I was talking about what are you sacrificing for convenience, that's where you're really sacrificing quality, right? So there's quality in the sense of it's good for you to consume,
Right.
and then there's quality of the actual delivery of the product.
Right.
And so I think there's a lot of convenience in some of these C-store marketplaces, but I think you are trading down on the quality of the product that you're putting in your body.
Right.
So, man,
It's funny. It's like the things that you're saying are, I think I was in Pennsylvania. Must have been earlier this year. It's probably February, and you're just driving through like central Pennsylvania, and there's a Taco Bell, and there's a Wawa, and they're always next door to each other, and they're both packed at lunch.
Yep.
And so it's interesting, right? Like if you think about, and some of this really harks back to my own, I guess, not naivete, but inexperience with the industry, where it's like I've only ever known this industry really in the evolution of the experience versus convenience spectrum, right? Like ever since the like digitization or digital growth started, it's always been like if you look at what happened with retail a decade ago, you either anchored really on convenience, and that was Amazon, or you anchored really on experience, that was like niche CPG, and you try to build a brand, and your margins are higher but your volume is lower. But if you go to convenience, your margins are lower but your volume is higher, and you're effectively a wholesaler. And it's like if you were in the middle, if you were Macy's or JCPenney, you just got crushed, right? You got totally carved out. Even Target versus Walmart. Walmart anchored all the way on convenience. Target has started to anchor way more on experience. And they may look like big box retailers, but when you're in the store, the layouts are very different. The products are very different. And it speaks to this convenience versus experience dynamic. I think the thing that I'm afraid of as we go further into 2025 and we talk about the growth of omnichannel and the evolution of this business is it seems like in-store traffic is down consistently across the board. It doesn't matter if you're QSR, fast casual dining. The only thing that is really spiking is third-party delivery. And so as operators, and given like the restaurant business is like can be daily hand-to-hand combat for dollars and margins and share and attention, like I worry that people will over optimize for the convenience oriented platforms. And so like you have brands that maybe are experiential or do want to provide the hospitality as you talk about on off-premise channels, just lose that because you're fighting for ranking in a phone book basically with its own algorithm. Can you talk a little bit, and this is the question finally, can you talk about how are you maintaining a brand presence in off-premise, period? If the world is going off-premise, if the world is going digital, what do you actually do to maintain a brand presence that leads to repeat guest counts being up 22% year over year in what everybody has described as a notoriously difficult year for restaurants?
There's twofold to that answer. So there's native and then there's third party, right? So with native, we put a lot of intention in our one-to-one communications to our guests, like in explaining the value proposition of ordering online. And, it is cheaper to order directly from us. If you order more than one menu item and pay the delivery fee that we pay DoorDash Drive or whomever, it's still cheaper. As long as you order more than one menu item, it is cheaper to order directly from us. We own your data. We can then we can further optimize our offerings to you because we know everything about you. Like the DoorDash bucket in my Bicky is, it's basically empty. So like you may not have lapsed out of our system. We just can't identify you in that third party channel, right? And then to your point, so for 2024, we're flat on DoorDash, and I mean not flat. We're dead even between third party and our native and app and online ordering. But we've also had native app and online ordering since 2015, so we were a little ahead of the curve as far as customer guest adoption. But so
when you say dead even, you mean in terms of like share of revenue for the business?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Dead even. But we're growing our native by several points, and that's through different mechanisms. But ultimately, to your answer, if customers are shifting to the convenience, I mean, you can't beat the convenience of a marketplace, right?
Right.
You don't know what you want to eat, you log in, you're going to see some pay for ads, you can do a little browsing, all of your repeat purchase, all your prior purchases are there. So if I know that I want the shrimp and squid udon noodles from Moa, like I'm just going to hit click, click, done, right? And it's going to show up at my door 27 minutes later.
Right.
You can't beat the convenience of that. So if those guests are going to be in those marketplaces, then it only makes sense for us as restaurateurs to take advantage of the performance marketing that's available in those channels to at least start the journey with the brand, right?
Yep.
The conversion piece is a completely different conversation, and that is a low yield game, but a game that you should always play.
Right.
But if you have protected your margin,
people don't often convert, is what you're saying.
Yeah, they very rarely convert.
Yeah, that's what we've seen in our data as well, historically. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's single digit, like low single digit.
Yeah, it's small.
But if you protected your margins within those channels, then it shouldn't be an issue.
Right.
And hopefully, as we evolve as an industry, at some point, everyone's going to realize that we're going to need to play in the sandbox together and share a little bit of this information because, DoorDash wants to know everything about everybody. We want to know everything about our guests. And, how do we backfill that? I mean, it doesn't make sense to send a lapse campaign to a guest who didn't technically lapse. They just chose a different channel.
Right.
And we don't have that inherent visibility. But ultimately, to answer your question, I think you have to strategically optimize your performance marketing to achieve what it is, whether it's day parts, whether it's day of the week, whether it's I don't XYZ, right?
Are you
or a churn guest within third party? You can target those.
Yeah. Are you shifting? So then, are you actually shifting dollars? Like, if we looked at 2025, are you going to be shifting more performance marketing dollars to the third parties? And then, is that net new investment, or are you shifting away from other stuff to put more dollars into that channel?
No, I mean we've started. I mean we went into it pretty hard this year. I don't know that it's
Okay.
going to be net new dollars. I mean our net new dollars are being spent in performance marketing and like Google and Meta,
Yeah.
doing lookalike audiences because now we can pull these hyper segments out of Vicky and then take that group of customers. Let's say this is in our ICP for this area.
This location. Yeah.
Go find these people using these keywords and hit it. And
Got
you
it.
can do that shockingly cheap.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, not every market's, I mean, it's not going to be cheap in New York City, but it's
For
cheaper
sure.
we are in the Southeast.
Got it.
So, but
Um,
I mean, obviously we're driving them to our channel, not to
of
third party.
course. Yeah. Not to the third party. Yeah. That's interesting. Okay. So it sounds like that's interesting. You're actually, I think, different in that regard, where I've heard other folks who are like, look, like the third party performance, it makes sense to invest more on third party and their performance marketing tools because there's intent there. There's less intent with not with Google, but certainly with Meta. There's less intent there, and so people are like, oh, we are shifting dollars from Meta to the third parties. Um,
To be clear,
maybe
Meta's like at the very bottom of the list.
yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay. Um, and then I guess how much of what we're seeing now in 2024 is sort of like back to normal with this business. Again, like I've really only really known this business for the past for the immediate for one, I had a very New York City view of it from when I started the company. And then by the time I started to get a non-New York City view of it, it was the middle of the pandemic. And it was like, as a tech person, you're like, oh shit, this is what we've been waiting for. This mass digitization of the industry. Obviously not waiting for from a business standpoint. That's not what you want, but at least from a digital adoption standpoint. But how much of this environment that we're in now, where it is softer consumer spending, softer traffic, let's call it stretching out of time between visits, how much of this is like, you've been doing with Groucho for 25 years. How much of this is just kind of how it always was from, let's call it, 2010 to 2019. And we are sort of reverting back to this is the restaurant business and the way it's always been versus how much of it is a new dynamic or a new normal.
I would definitely lean towards the new normal. I mean,
Okay.
there's always been economic cycles. I mean,
Right.
always. Like
Right.
2008 was a huge economic cycle, right? Um, so that part of it is still very much real. I think, the economic cycle that we experienced during COVID was certainly anomalous. I mean, basically everybody got a bonus,
Yeah.
and became cash flush. Savings rates were at all times highs. It was just a different. I mean, I certainly hope that was a one-of event,
Right.
but
Same. Yeah.
you start reading some of the key economic data that's coming out now, like consumer debt is at an all-time high, credit card debt's at an all-time high. We're starting to read about, higher delinquencies. It's shocking to me sometimes when I go into a grocery. I don't buy most of the groceries at my home. I buy lots of groceries for
Because you just take
Groucho's,
them
but
from Groucho's, so that's what.
no.
I
But
need
it's
bread.
shocking.
It's just
It's shocking to me what it costs to get groceries
yeah.
now, or consumer goods. Like I bought some deodorant yesterday; it was $12. I'm like,
Yeah.
when did deodorant come $12?
I know. Yep. Yep.
So I don't know that wages have not kept up with inflation, right?
Right.
I mean, that's for sure. And
Right.
so I think ultimately, to answer your question, it's the same, but it's also different because now it's omni-channel. So the hospitality experiences we provided before were pretty easy. You could look at a customer's face and know that something was wrong,
Right.
right? And you
Right.
could go over and provide that service recovery one-to-one and bring them back into the fold, hopefully, right? Now you have to do that digitally and across many, many channels like third party, online, direct ordering, Yelp, Facebook, Google, Meta, blah, blah, blah. I mean,
Yeah.
so that's what's
You just
fundamentally
got to meet
changed.
people where they are, basically. Now, more so. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
100% you have to meet people where they are. And, you have to engage to stay relevant, period.
Yeah.
Right? If you do not engage, you will lose that relevancy within the algorithms, and you will continue to get suppressed and suppressed and suppressed and suppressed. And I mean, it's shocking to me when I like order from a restaurant sometimes and like I go online and either their website is a Facebook page or it's some really crappy picture of a menu or God forbid a PDF that's, not searchable. Um,
Yep.
so I think we are now in a perpetual state of optimization
Yep.
because, the games change, the rules change, the algorithms change, and consumer behavior has absolutely changed.
Yeah.
And so I think when we were talking yesterday, how do we compete with the culture shift and remain relevant in both historical versions of hospitality
Right.
and now the new versions of
Right.
hospitality? You
Because like
have to
you
do
said, you have
both.
4 generations of consumers coming to Groucho's, and you have to be
Correct.
relevant to all of them.
Correct. I mean, we can't all be a wing zone and be a 90% off prem and 90% digital. Like,
Right.
if that's your game, awesome. Or if you're a white tablecloth and you're all on premises
All
and you
experience.
don't care, I mean, it's all experience driven. But I think by and large, especially in the QSR and fast casual segment, I mean, it's hybrid, right? And we have to be omni-channel, omnipresent, and omni-engaged.
Yeah. 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 No, I mean,
That's what's
I get it.
fundamentally changed.
Yeah, no, I get it. I get it. I think the thing that I'm curious about, we talked a little bit about this in terms of your 2024 performance and price and check being up. Obviously, a lot of people took price over the last couple of years. You had to take price. I think I can think of maybe I can count on one hand the number of brands I know that did not take any price in 2023 and well, call it 2023, 2022, 2023. When you look at 2025 performance, how much contribution are you actually looking for from traffic versus versus price? And maybe we can break that down further. Well, let's start there, and then we can break the traffic part down a little bit further. But like, how are you positioned in terms of traffic versus price, looking specifically at the performance you want in 2025?
I mean, I would much rather it be from traffic than price. There was many influences, especially during COVID, that kind of like specifically in our little segment of the industry. So like turkey was at an all-time high due to the H5N1 virus, and basically decimated the turkey crop. So turkey doubled in price if you could even get it. And we're dealing with some new supply chain issues now. A lot of it related to weather events. So
Yeah, yeah, being in the southeast for sure. Yeah,
well, not just that. I mean, the vast majority of the produce for this country is grown in two places,
mm.
Salinas, California, or Yuma, Arizona, depending on the time of the year.
Mm.
And, you get a bomb cyclone or you get a freeze in the middle of winter in Yuma. I mean, these are highly perishable crop items, right? And that is as commoditized as it gets. So there are certain things that will always be unknown. I think we, knock on wood, we have driven some cost out that we had to absorb during COVID, um, specifically in core protein and specifically in consumer packaging goods, because
Mm.
everybody went to disposable and prices just skyrocketed just based on supply and demand economics. And
Right.
so we've driven some cost out of that and found some economies of scale and found good vendor partnerships. So I'm optimistic that we can continue to maintain that and really just focus on traffic and revenue and retention. But for me, pricing is purely mathematical.
Yeah.
Like it is. I mean, we have this ridiculous spreadsheet that we built, and I mean, it's just pure math to me.
Meaning that it's like whatever whatever the inputs are, sort of whatever your end price is determined by whatever the fluctuations in the inputs are, basically.
Well, sustained fluctuations. I wouldn't call them like short term anything.
Right.
I'm not
We're not doing dynamic pricing here. Dirty word. We can't say that anymore. Fair enough. By the way, I do want to give one housekeeping note. Deric and I are probably going to go for another 7, maybe 10 minutes max. And then to the extent that those of you watching have questions, please feel free. There's a chat button in the bottom right. There's a questions button as well that you should see on your end. Please feel free to drop in any questions, and we will have time for Q&A after this. Jumping back to the point on traffic versus price for 2025, when you think about the balance of traffic for 2025, Are you going to hold the same trend? Is it going to be new guest traffic's going to be down, call it low to mid single digits, and then you want to see a massive ramp in repeat guest traffic as well? I guess set aside what you want. What do you expect to happen just based on how you run the business? What are your expectations for new traffic versus repeat guest traffic for next year?
I mean, I see us maintaining the status quo. I
Yeah.
mean, I think, January and February are kind of always rough for the industry, just for many reasons. But I see the status quo being maintained. I don't see any quick turnaround in the economy. I mean, interest rates aren't really having any bearing on home sales right now.
Mm.
There's just so much influence, and you know, there's only so much money, and you can't go into debt to buy groceries. So, I see that staying the same, and we're certainly going to put our efforts behind that. Our focus is going to be, will continue to be shifting to native digital because there's just too many efficiencies to be found with scale in that channel.
What are some of those efficiencies?
The immediate one is reduction of human error, reduction of human capital. Um,
Because
those
the
would be
order
the
just
two.
gets pushed to the POS and the ticket just gets printed.
Correct,
And
and
you
you're
mean,
not
and you're
spending
talking about
somebody.
the phone. You're talking about phone orders specifically. Like, are you talking about?
No,
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. I'll let you go. Yeah.
no. We've invested in phone automation this year, and actually we just built some custom groups in Vicky to measure the three different versions we're doing to see which one provides the biggest growth in sales channel and the best return on our investment. But
Yeah.
I mean, the reason that our phone orders are contracting is 1,000% contributed to this phone automation. So, I mean, we put in AI phone automation that's answering the phones and pushing people to direct order links and answering their basic questions instead of me having, John answering the phone and spending an average of 3 minutes per phone call answering questions that are there. And generally speaking, millennials and Gen Zs aren't going to pick up the phone and call you anyway, right?
Right.
Pre-COVID, our business was all phone
Everybody
orders
hates
for
on
takeout.
millennials. Come on, I gotta stand up for my generation. What is?
There's nothing wrong with that. I don't like calling in an order either.
That's fair. That's fair.
I am soundly Gen X, sir.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. And so, if I guess if what are you doing then to prepare? How are you approaching 2025 relative to how you approach 2024? Is there anything you're doing in terms of prepping your team, prepping your tech, prepping your franchisees? Anything you're doing there that you feel like is a departure from how you've approached this year or prior year?
I mean, we're definitely doing a lot of deep dives on the tech side. I mean, we have a pretty comprehensive tech stack now, but we need some consolidation because it's just too much for the front line and for our managers.
Mm.
It's fine for me to have 10 dashboards. It's not fine for my general managers to have 10 dashboards. It's just that's not acceptable. So, we're looking at some consolidation there. We're definitely, I think one of our biggest challenges right now is PII acquisition. And, there's lots of
Like
nuance to
phone
that
numbers,
statement.
email addresses, that kind of stuff. You mean? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the two big rocks, those are it, phone and email, right? Get one, you can probably get the other.
Yeah.
So we have a little disconnect in our system on getting there because we know that the loyalty customers, are certainly the most valuable, but we don't neglect any customers.
Yeah.
That's not the statement here, but so yeah, we're going to do some further optimization in our tech stacks, with you being the only non-negotiable. So.
Well, I mean,
And continuing to monitor and understand and delve into this data to it's like having all this data is great, but you have to make it actionable,
yeah.
and you have to make it actionable that actually gives you a return on your investment, whether it's just the gathering and collection of the data or the interpretation of the data or the activation of the data, right?
Yeah.
So that's I mean, we've got the basics down. Like all the basic automations are firing, they're working, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. So now we're getting into some much more nuanced segmentation that either you can use for awareness marketing or, you can use for lookalike audiences in different platforms or
Yep.
lookalike audiences into third parties. And then, I think the holy grail for all of us is to figure out how to have a better understanding of our third-party customer.
Right. Last question. We've talked a lot about your perspectives from, the corporate side. What are you hearing from general managers or franchisees in terms of how they're feeling about how their individual business or businesses have done, and then how they are thinking about next year as well?
I think the two biggest discussion points I have with our franchisees and general managers is around the decline in in-store traffic.
Yeah.
Because we are table service inside, so that impacts their teams and morale and tips and all of these things. And
right.
how do you don't want to cut your labor teams and then provide an inferior experience. So that's certainly the tightrope. And then the other piece would be, COVID has made it much harder to deal with the general public. People have zero patience, zero tolerance, and it's just. I said this recently. I don't remember who I was talking to, but I read an article about you can go into McDonald's anywhere in the world and get a quarter pounder, and it can be messed up, and you won't care. You expect it. But if you walk into my local sandwich shop or into a noodle shop in New York City, and they screw up your ramen or screw up your sandwich, like it's the end of the world, and they're going to go blast you on social media and Facebook, and that's hard to deal with that day in and day out because it becomes emotionally draining.
Yeah.
And it's personal. I mean, you've invested your life savings, your work, and all of these things into this business, and one person can come in and destroy your day because they're missing a pickle. I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's a damn pickle, right? So, and that's why you have to have all of these digital service recovery tools now, because if you don't, it will impact your ability to gain new customers. I mean, people go online to decide where they're going to purchase whatever it is, whether it's a sofa or a sandwich,
Yeah.
and you need to be in that top 5 listing, top 3. So, I mean, those are the biggest concerns. And then, the last one would be just the consolidating the tech.
Yeah.
I mean, we need some tools that take the data and give us some actionable intelligence instead of having to decipher all of this ourselves. And I think we're there. We're getting really close with large language learning models and things of this nature. And companies like Bicky have an opportunity to look at this data in aggregate.
It's turning into a product feedback session now. So. Like you had that chance yesterday, Deric. Come on. No,
I brought it up.
Look, that is something that this conversation side. That's something that we think about all the time. Is just like we have all the data. How do we just make it more accessible to our operators, and not just accessible in the here it is, do something with it, but accessible in the sense of like here's what you should be doing with it, and here's how you should be thinking about it. So, yeah,
correct.
I appreciate that. Yeah. Well, cool. I'm happy to open it up for questions here. I don't see any in our little module, but if there are questions or anybody wants to drop anything into the chat, Deric and I could probably go for another 5 hours. We will only go another 5 minutes unless there are questions here. But I'll pause if anybody wants to drop in a question. Okay. We will. Let's keep it rolling then. So I think one thing that you raised that I thought was very interesting, this will be my second to last question before we wrap up here, but one thing I thought you raised that was very interesting was it seems like what I'm hearing from you is consumers will continue they won't stop spending at restaurants. They will just stretch out the visits, number one. Number two, the growth in competition from emerging brands is probably siphoning off the trial period for your brand specifically. So brands that have been around for a while and have sort of like deep roots in local markets, someone new, someone exciting, maybe a few of these come in, they will clip some of that new guest trial. And so what you really need to do is think about doubling down on maintaining frequency and hopefully improving frequency of the guests that you have today? Is that sort of like the way? Is that if I was to like play out your strategy for 2025, is that like the right way I should be thinking about it for Groucho's Deli specifically?
Yes, and then enhancing certain components specifically around loyalty and rewards, like that is something we are actively
Yeah.
looking at. Is, I think especially when you're talking about the up and coming spenders, the Gen Zs, we
Yeah.
need to. I think having gamification and these instant gratification little dopamine hits are required.
Can I ask you so? Can
So
I ask you separately? We talk like when you and it just this is all a roundabout way of basically saying that in-store traffic is going to continue to decline. What's the top for a digital bit? Like if you look at Groucho's 5 years from now, what percentage of your business would you say is digital, third party and first party? It's 58% today. Where do you feel like the ceiling is for that?
maybe 70.
Okay.
At least for the next 5 years. I mean, if you look at my core demographic in your platform, I mean, it's a 42-year-old white female, right? I mean, they are not going to trade down to pure digital experiences.
Mm.
Some will, certainly, but 90% of our known guests have families, have children. So families go out to eat. The act of eating out is inherently social. It's a time for families to just get out of the hustle and bustle of life. And even if it's just 30 minutes having a sandwich or a salad with each other, that's not going away
Yeah.
or anytime soon.
But it
It's
is
just
becoming less frequent.
correct. When I say you have to be nimble and agile, I mean, we're an 83-year-old brand. I mean, we do nothing but adapt, and we will
Yeah.
continue to adapt.
Yeah.
So I think you have to let your walking knowledge, the data, the insights tell you which way to pivot. And then all while maintaining this legacy version of hospitality that I think has to stay.
Yeah.
And then how do we translate that into the digital world?
Right. Right.
Like I think I sent you a picture of some food that I ordered recently. It was the most beautiful takeout packaging I've ever seen in my
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was as good as the restaurant.
Yeah.
And I was blown away. And I was sitting here thinking, oh my God, what did this cost? But
Yeah.
that is so memorable to me. I am biased, right? But I think another customer would appreciate getting that same beautiful package delivered to them. They're like, thought, care went into providing this service.
That experience outside the four walls and into yeah. Yeah.
So how do you make that better? How do you improve that? How do you provide the value?
Yeah.
I think we're all, I don't want to say we're in the wild, wild west, but we're pretty close.
Yeah. Yeah. Last question is, what piece of advice do you have for other operators who are watching this as they prep for next year?
Multiple things. I would say you need to be
You got to pick
focusing.
one. You got to pick one. Pick your most important piece of advice.
You have to have a comprehensive digital reputation management strategy if you want to compete.
Yeah.
Humans make errors. You need to acknowledge those errors, and especially on public forums, you cannot ignore your customers.
Yeah.
You need to optimize your business for the digital world. And if you're not doing that, you will get left behind.
Yeah.
That would be my big piece of advice. And the second would be figure out who your ICP is and what levers do you need to move to grow that ICP and engage that ICP for higher retention, frequency, and spend.
I love it. Typical Deric. I asked you one and you snuck in two. So, well, thanks so much, Deric. I really appreciate you spending 50 minutes with us today, an hour yesterday, just to prep for this and share your time. And for those of you watching, thank you so much, whether it's live, whether it's the recording. Thanks for spending a part of your day with us. Hope it was valuable. Hope you got something out of it. And we will see you on the next one. And of course, best of luck in preparing for 2025. Thanks again.
Thanks for having me, Abhinav.
Of course. Take care.